Ba-bum. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to day whatever it is. I think we're at day number 5 of a 12-part series, which includes Saturday and Sunday, which I did not realize until this morning. So, other than Denise, maybe you'll be here on Saturday and Sunday. Denise, high five. I will see you Saturday and Sunday morning. Can't even wait. For those of you that have emailed yesterday, yes, you can still share the registration link for people because the recordings will be on the playlist. Please share it out, get it out. Sounds great. Let's do it together. Today we are going to be doing another activity that is referred to as Just Rescue. This particular one, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, usually is done in person, and I converted it to a virtual thing. This is one of the few workshops I had to convert to because of COVID. And extra bonus, in the summary email today, you're going to get the facilitation guide of how to do it in person, how to do it virtually, how to do it hybrid, etc. Because it is my most frequently stolen activity. So it doesn't count as stolen if I give you the facilitation guide, right? Right? You're still going to want to steal it. So I'm going to ask you to just participate and be with me today. I promise you're going to get the facilitation guide. Again, the texting number, 202-670-4262. I'm starting to get into some really good conversations with people, so feel free to use that number and the QR code so that you can follow me on the Instagram. For this particular activity, what I think we're going to be really uncovering is pretty much the harm of diversity trainings. I don't know if any of you have ever been to a diversity training and you left feeling worse or smaller afterwards. I'm not a fan of that. And part of it, I think, is this pressure to never, ever, 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 ever make a judgment or an assumption. And instead, how about we work with the judgments and assumptions that we make? We often make judgments and assumptions to feel safe or to feel prepared. So I don't think it's a skill you need to stop doing. I think it's a skill you need to become conscious of doing, if that makes any sense, and work with the judgments and assumptions that you make. So my job today is going to be to make you uncomfortable. And some of you are like, boo, you've been doing that every morning. Great. Well, it's just another day. But if you leave this particular workshop 100% comfortable, that's totally your fault. It is safe and there's no preparation needed. But my job is to kind of tweak your brain a little bit. If you are calling in from a group, meaning like multiples of you are either watching the recording or multiples of you are sitting in the same room with the same Zoom link, you can do this as a group, but I'm going to assume direction-wise, everybody's kind of on their own, in their own space, possibly wearing pants, and we're just going to do it individually. That's how I'm going to do the directions today. Sound good? I'm doing a high five to you. You can put 5s in the chat. That's high-fiving me in ways that I love. Okay, so we are going to do one set of directions, and this is a little challenging if people come in late. And basically, Pat, since you've been deputized, the folks that come in late, they're just on their own. They're going to have to catch up. And I will play with them in the chat, so you don't have to do anything. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a single set of directions, and then you are going to be released on your own, not breakout rooms, just in your own universe. And I want you to develop a solution. So if that is not enough excitement to get started, I have one high five. Thanks, Cass, for the high five. I just want to point out one high five. It is Friday morning over here on the West Coast. I have one high five. Okay, here they come. Thank you. I don't have therapy until next week, so keep them coming. Okay, I am assuming it's 5 after. So I'm going to assume if you're here, you're here. So here are the directions that I am not going to repeat. Are you ready? Number 1, I am the mayor. You individually represent the mayor's council. Congratulations. This is also a metaphor of displacement of responsibility. So I am going to go play golf. However, there is a storm and there are 14 people stuck on a roof and you have a boat that holds 10 people. And what I want you to do is to develop a solution. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to be able to develop a solution. You're going to want to take a screenshot, write these down, whatever. This is the information we know about the 14 people. You got a boat that holds 10, figure it out. You have a 330-pound person, a legal alien, a 15-year-old committed twice for robbery, welfare recipient of 15 years, feminist, an epileptic, drag queen, a pregnant Black woman, a Jehovah's Witness, a person disfigured by fire, a Korean market owner, an HIV positive person who continues to have sex, a Hasidic Jew, and a person carrying life savings. So, big storm, boat, 10 people on the boat. You are the only person who can play with yourself. So, go, have at it. Here's 10 minutes. I'll put the list up too, just in case. Those of you that are playing along, I have an emergency announcement. This is my cool under pressure crisis announcement that I'm giving you. Crisis management. Are you ready for the crisis? That is that the storm waters are rising much faster than I thought. So instead of 10 minutes, you only have 2 minutes left. All right, less than a minute. As we are approaching the end of our emergency time, I used to tell people to stop and then they would cheat. And what I instead am going to ask you to do is freeze. What I mean by that is you're still going to cheat, especially if you're working by yourself. You can cheat. I'm not even going to know. But I want you to, one, pay attention to the process that you just did. You probably didn't even get to finish, which is by design. And I want you to pay attention to what came up for you. So when I say freeze, this is going to be one of these moments which in a webinar is kind of strange. And if you're in a group out there by yourself, I can't really monitor, but I'm going to ask you to be completely silent until I say unfreeze. The reason why, and especially if you end up stealing this activity and doing it on your own, this is a little facilitation tip. Whatever is about to get said by one of you is probably going to offend somebody. You may or may not even need it, but that is the entire point of this activity, is that I need to like catch us, me included, catch us in what's going on in our heads. So please do not plug your speakers in. Do not say it out loud. I'm going to say all kinds of stuff, but in my charming, semi-humorous way that has an educational point. So until I say unfreeze, do not say anything out loud. I do want you to be responsible, if not at least raucously punching up and paying attention to what comes up for you as I go through this process. Now, like I said, typically speaking, when I'm in a room, I'll tell people they have 10 minutes or so. I'll interrupt with the emergency announcement. They throw themselves into sheer panic. When they throw themselves into sheer panic, prior to then, and Amy, you had put in the chat something similar to most people's kind of vibe. And that is, ugh, these situations stink. Yeah, they do stink. And yet these situations happen constantly, and we are constantly making very quick decisions. So what I needed to do as a facilitator was get all the participants caught in those quick decisions, interrupt it, so then we can have a macro conversation about those conversations where judgments and assumptions happen. I'm not encouraging us to never make judgments and assumptions. I'm encouraging us to be conscious that we do, work with the ones that we are making, and try to find the root of the ones that we're making in our own lives, because they make us feel safe and prepared. And that's just more becoming conscious of the bias that your lived experience has taught you. It's a judgment-free zone-ish. We're all judging each other anyway. Some of you don't like my little hat, but you should have seen what my hair looked like. That's judgment, right? If you can feel safe and prepared while also noticing what comes up in your head, you're going to be more conscious of kind of how you show up in the world. And that's ultimately what we're looking for. So I interrupted. I have now made you freeze. Do not talk out loud. Do not put anything in the chat. You can text me if you need to. The texting number again is 202-670-4262. But I would really encourage you to not even do that. Just sit in the puddle that is yourself, because everybody else is experiencing yourself. This, for some of us, may be the first time we've really experienced ourselves in a while. So when I say how people make this choice, that in itself is amazing to me. So the directions actually were like, don't play with other people. There's 14 people on a roof. There's a storm. You have a boat that holds 10. Peace out. I'm going to go play golf. When we do this in a small group, or if you do this by yourself, first fascinating thing. Number one, I did not say anybody has to die, but we get real extreme, especially with the emergency announcement that I didn't even give in a really emergency tone. But as soon as that happens, we got to start killing people. I did not say anybody had to die. There's a possibility the people that you put on a boat got electrocuted, and the people who were left on the roof were rescued by a Coast Guard helicopter, right? All these things are possible, but notice your investment in certain people to die or to be saved is about you. That's what we're talking about here, okay? So I also want to point out that hardly ever, and I say that because maybe it happened once and I'm just not remembering, does the mayor's council rescue itself. And often when we look at how power and privilege works, is that people who are in power, who have the resources, do a little inventory and they decide they can let go of one boat. But that boat only holds 10. Well, let me help you figure out who the best 10 are. We can talk about service learning or community service projects or whatever, but this one resource has been dispatched to help those poor souls over there on the roof. But you pictured Armageddon with these massive floods in a Will Smith movie, but somehow or another, the mayor's council, you were safe. You're always safe. You're always on dry land, because we're only actually saving some, not all, because not everyone's worth saving, of course, and we know best which ones to expend our resources on. That's a real power dynamic that happens all the time at work, not just in hypothetical situations about storms, but you figure out which resources are available and how to dole them out. I don't think there's anything wrong with that process necessarily. The biggest wrong is that we pretend we don't do that. We include everyone. You can't. You only have one boat. So be conscious of who you're excluding is the first step of inclusion. But let me explain. Okay, so again, you're not talking, but I want you to think about where you decided to start making this process or this choice. Number one, you felt generally no urgency to save yourself. You're only saving these 14 people who are over there on a bubble. Fascinating. Okay. So usually what happens, and this may happen more in a group dynamic. I'm actually kind of fascinated because there's so many of you that are going to be doing this by yourself if it's still applicable. Probably is, because human behavior is human behavior. So let's say you start off normal, and that is good and bad person. Well, who is a good person and who is a bad person? You don't actually know. any of that information, but you can fill in a story about people and make up a good person or a bad person based on 7 words or less. Some of you are a little more discerning than just a good person, bad person. And so you do some kind of combination of like who needs medical services, who's healthy, who's a long life to live or not a long life to live. Wow, you know so much information that is not actually given to you. Can you see that? Again, I'm not judging you. This is what we do. But can we become conscious of what we do, of writing these very complicated stories, often that are incongruent? We'll get there. So you go to medical stuff, you don't really know that information, but you make guesses. Who's old, who's young, long life, short life. Sometimes gender may come in this. It's like chivalry, right? Like women and children, they're saved first. Who all's a woman? Who all is a child? You don't know that information. If you recall back to yesterday, we don't know who identifies as a woman unless they say, hey, by the way, I identify as a woman. You just zipped through the triangle real quick on all 14 people on the boat to determine how chivalrous to be. That's good intention, but it's not necessarily accurate. Semi-blind selection is that you've made some obvious choices and then you just decide to kind of randomize the rest. But it's not a completely blind selection. You're not like leaving it to fate because you likely didn't pick from 14. At best, the pregnant Black woman makes it on the boat almost instantaneously. And then maybe you picked from the remaining 13. But we displace responsibility to fate, except we've actually biased fate by starting off with the people we knew we were going to kill or starting off with the people we knew we were going to save. Again, I'm not saying that this is a judgment. I just want us to notice what we do in a fictitious situation because you probably do this in real life as well. So can we become more conscious of what we do when we're making these kind of choices around power and resources? Then there's the beauty pageant interview. Especially in a group dynamic, there's almost always someone who kind of pushes back from the group and is like, well, I'm not God. How am I supposed to make these choices? You ever make a choice of which chair to sit in a movie theater? Or park your car and then just decide that that's not the right parking space for you anymore? You got to move. You don't have to be some kind of followed deity in order to actually do this. But we like to think that so that we don't have to take responsibility that we make these kind of choices all the time. Beauty pageant would be asking for more information, right? Especially, dear friends, those of you, I see you, that are in HR. We are constantly like, you know what we need to do is a focus group. Girl, you do focus groups, you're going to find out more information and it's just going to make it that much more complicated. This is why like admissions officers for colleges look at financial aid numbers and things. They reduce it down to a quantifiable number instead of the whole sad story. And when I work with organizations who have scholarships, they love the sad stories. So they're somehow quantifying the pain and suffering of an applicant that was smart enough to put that stuff into an essay that may or may not even align with the qualifications of the scholarship. So it's one of the first things I do of like, where are you quantifying out truth and where are you banking on truth that may or may not have anything to do with your qualifications? Then we have thinking outside of the box, folks. I am absolutely one of these people. So you might have been like, well, I don't know, let's create a swimming schedule. People can just dangle. If it's really an emergency, let's just put all 14 people in the boat and see what happens, right? Or boats are terrible. I hate boats. I can't stand boats. I'd be like, peace out. I'm staying on a roof. Thank you. Plus, the roof is taller. Why are we getting off the roof in the first place? Anyway, thinking outside of the box could be a rope ladder. A Pegasus comes swooping in and saves everybody. But what happens with thinking outside of the box people is they are so used to being shut down that it doesn't take very much to shut them down. So that somebody could say, like, I have this idea, and you don't even need a partner sometimes to get shut down. Because then what happens is, no, there's no Pegasus coming. She said kill 4 people. Oh, okay. And then that part of you just goes stands in the corner with a Pegasus. Where is creativity and innovation supposed to come from if we shut down the thinking outside of the box people? We're supposed to encourage that kind of behavior. And for the record, I believe in Pegasi. Why not? Sure, that'd be fine. Last but not least, and I actually had to add this category in, is the academic. We all know these people. The academic is like, excuse me. I don't know if you're familiar with intersectionality and simultaneity theory, but the Korean market owner is also a drag queen and happens to be carrying their life savings. And they also are an epileptic. So there's really only 10 people. It's a trick. How much power or privilege, aka audacity, do you have that you're going to change the rules of my game so that you can feel like you won it? Just sit on that one for a second, because we do this constantly. Constantly. We figure out a way that we can win someone else's situation, but that's totally about us. If we could catch ourselves doing that occasionally, there's a good chance you might have more friends. And what I mean by more friends is, when's the last time someone invited you to a movie? I say this because no one invites me to a movie, because the last time my friends invited me to a movie, it was Terminator versus Aliens. Is that what it was? Something like that. That's a horrible movie. I do not recommend. And I went, and then we went to Denny's afterwards, because that's what you do after a movie. And my friends stupidly said, Jess, what was your favorite part of the movie? And I said, well, the ethnically ambiguous character was not the first person to die. No one wants to go to a movie with someone who that's what you're going to say. Alien versus Predator. That's what it was, because I know Pat's Googling it. Alien versus Predator. Do not watch this movie. It's terrible. Although the ethnically ambiguous sheriff is not the first person to die. And he doesn't even go into the basement because there's no woman in a white t-shirt. Anyway, if you can notice your own behaviors, but you can notice your own decision processes and how you reach a decision. I'm not saying you have to do it differently, but can you just be conscious of it in the first place? Wouldn't that be great? Because if it's not you, who is it going to be? So perhaps you went through whatever you did first or whatever you did second, and then you did this thing, and then you did this thing. And then we have arrived, we're still at these 14 people. So what I want to do is go through all of them. And I want you, again, you are to be quiet, especially if you're sitting in a group of people, because you're going to say stuff out loud and you're going to have to see them again on Monday. I don't got to see nobody on Monday. That's why I'm self-employed and a feral employee. Could you imagine me 9 to 5, Monday through Friday? No, I can't either. So we already did the pregnant Black woman, but let's go back to her for just a second. Pregnant Black woman almost always makes it in the boat, but not because of medical needs or chivalry, or it's a diversity program. So people are like, you better put her on the boat. Sometimes that happens. What actually happens, though, more often than not, is she is a coupon because she's buy one, get one free. Fascinating, right? People will actually say that out loud. But when I talk about contradictory things, the 330-pound person does not get put on the boat. Well, what if they're pregnant? They could be a coupon. What if they're an athlete and really, really strong? I would think that would be helpful. What if they're one of those very tall, skinny people that can fold themselves up like origami and be on the boat? What if they're a really good swimmer? Somebody somewhere, Emily's not here today, but somebody somewhere has an engineering background, is like, well, you could put the 330-pound person in the center of the boat and that would be good for waves. Because, physics. What? It's fascinating, the stories that we write. I don't know what's right. I just typed 330-pound person. But imagine the stories that you fill in. And where do those come from? What is the root? Most of us picture something that aligns with what is called the white imagination, and that our culture is very sizist. We wrote a story about an obese white man, probably like Fat Bastard from the Austin Powers movie Gone Wrong. We assume they're really lazy and they don't do anything, and so they have no value. Sometimes people will say, no, they're buoyant, so they can just float. Again, this is why I'm telling you to be quiet and don't say anything out loud. Then we get to the illegal alien. What is amazing to me is in the US, no matter where I am in the country, one person tells me I shouldn't be using this language, and the rest of the room tells me that they can swim. Why would you waste a spot on a boat for someone who can swim? So pull up Google Maps in your head. Please notice that the people that you think are swimming here in the southwest of the United States are swimming in a desert and dying of dehydration because the brown is not the people. Good try. The brown there is a desert. It doesn't make any sense. But stereotypes don't make sense. And as soon as you start like actually looking at how you're deciding things based on stereotypes, the logic will fall apart. And if it doesn't fall apart, it won't be congruent likely with the next set of stereotypes. So then we have the 15-year-old committed twice for robbery. Ask yourself if they are innocent or guilty. Did you make it a young man or a young woman? Is this person non-binary? Did you think of that? Likely no. Okay, fascinating, an option. For me, where my bias kicks in, if this person was stealing Sudafed because their grandmother's Medicaid ran out, I would save them. If they were stealing Sudafed to make meth, I would kill them. Why does someone's actions have such a stark difference in my own mind when it comes to bias? I also don't even have children. I just live in a neighborhood with a lot of meth. So that's where that root's coming from. That's how I can be responsible for it. The welfare recipient of 15 years, most people picture a woman with a lot of kids. Well, most of us haven't experienced welfare. So that's a very easy stereotype to talk about the thems because we've never been one of the thems. But there are people with full-time jobs, multiple jobs even, who are still receiving some kind of state or federal assistance because we don't pay people a living wage. This 15-year-old could easily be a child. Could have been born into the welfare system by someone who is full-time employed. But that's not always the story that we have. Then we get to the feminist. Usually someone's like, if we don't do something with the feminist, Jess is totally coming for us. Well, interestingly, I am from Texas, so being called a feminist was a really bad thing growing up. And it wasn't actually until I started dating my now partner that I was informed I am actually a feminist and that is not a bad thing. But I distinctly remember all the women that I like really valued in my life sitting around the kitchen table one day talking about how terrible the ERA was. For those of you that don't know, the ERA is the Equal Rights Amendment that has yet to pass Congress. And the women in my life were saying that it was terrible. And so I was just kind of baffled because I didn't understand why an equal rights amendment could possibly be bad. Just like the Civil Rights Act shouldn't have to be a bill. I completely agree, dear Supreme Court. And yet here we are. If we just rely on humans to do the right thing, we're screwed. So we need your help. So please step up and help us do the right thing. Meanwhile, people aren't doing the right thing. That's how laws work. That's why we have laws, because we can't actually just do the right kind thing for each other all the time. We have to be held accountable to something. I'm letting my politics slip. When the feminist comes up, often it ends up in a conversation in your head or out loud with the Hasidic Jew and the Jehovah's Witness. I particularly love watching this occur. And the reason why is people don't really know what a Hasidic Jew is, but it does go back to yesterday's conversation about different ethnicities within the Jewish community. So a Hasidic Jew and a Jehovah's Witness, people get that confused with a Hare Krishna. They just go straight to tambourines and are like annoying. So then they think that the Hasidic Jew and the Jehovah's Witness are going to be arguing, but the feminist could mediate and probably has a quinoa salad of some sort. So we're just going to leave the three of them on the three of them on the roof with the salad, but now we only have one more spot of someone to leave behind. Pressure on. We are making very complicated choices based on almost no information. Then we have the drag queen. Drag queen usually gets tabled for later because we don't actually think of this person as a person with a family or, responsibilities or something. We just think of them as a sparkly jam box. And who needs a good round of moral support? Like I will survive episode. Do we want that person on the boat? Do we want that person on the roof? Stay tuned. Let's table them for later and determine what's going on. The epileptic, I have sometimes, this is also why I encourage you to be quiet. I have been sometimes, and by that I mean more than once, asked out loud in a room full of people doing this activity if epileptic means they're gay. Now, why I think this is fascinating is that just because you don't know what a word means doesn't mean that it is a new term in the gay community. If you remember yesterday's triangle, we did all the different letters. Some of those letters, we don't even know what they really mean. They get rolled into a word that we do know. And there's thousands of words that I don't even know, even as a member of the community. But epilepsy and heterosexuality are not mutually exclusive. And when you don't know what a word means and you think it's a slang term for something else, you should probably use your friend Google more often. So an epileptic may have seizures, may not have seizures, may need medical attention, may not need medical attention. So this is an example of when you would say, hey, epileptic, do you want to get on a boat or you don't want to get on the boat? What's the best thing for you? That kind of takes me to a more distracted place of how do we know this information about the 14 people to begin with? I don't know. We're suspending reality, but it is a fascinating pattern. After the epileptic, I like to talk about the Korean market owner. The Korean market owner is a fascinating grammar test because you pictured a Korean market owner, not a Korean market owner. Let me explain. You likely pictured a Korean man who owns a market, therefore is good at business and economics, and they're already a model minority. So then you're going to save them because at the fall of civilization, we need the free market to continue, sponsored by Milton Friedman, right? Where did this come from? If it is the end of everything, then whatever money this market owner has likely is not going to work. But that again is playing logic. And why is a business owner still a man? Please see above. Haven't we made any progress at all? But it could be a Korean market owner, meaning somebody who owns a market that sells Korean stuff. So you either just got hungry or you pictured like a Dollar Tree because we don't really pay attention to nationality stereotypes. And a Dollar Tree or a convenience store or something like that sells feather dusters. We don't always apply really strong economic and business skills there. It's 3 words and diabolically opposite responses. Our minds are fascinating places. Can we just be slightly more responsible for them? That's all I'm asking. Then you have the person carrying life savings. Well, are they good in economics and business? Are they a homeless person pushing their life savings around in a cart? I am almost 50 years old and have been self-employed for a very long time. And when I turned 40, I did a grown-up thing and I opened a savings account. I know. That's okay. Relax. It's very exciting. I know. Do not get too excited. Don't ask me what the balance of that savings account is. You have to have $5 in it to keep it open. So there's at least $5 in it. But I don't know that there's much more than $5 in that savings account. So what did you picture? Often what you pictured, thanks to Glenn Beck, is like Santa Claus walking down the street with a big bag of gold bars. Well, wouldn't that be helpful for the money the Korean market owner has that's going to keep the free market economy going after Armageddon? Wouldn't that be good? No, we just picture a greedy person. And if they're greedy, then we should kill them. Okay. Back to the anchor physics problem. Can you put the bag of gold bars on the boat for the waves? Is that just the 330-pound person? Okay. Stop asking questions. Just notice what's going on in your head. Person disfigured by fire. One of my favorite parts about this, and I was hoping more people would be on video so I could see somebody do this. But when you do this in a group, when they get to this one, they touch their face because somehow the person disfigured by fire has a facial scar. And can you think of something worse in our culture than to have a facial scar? I mean, I can think of a lot of things worse, but not when it comes to vanity. So I ask myself, as a motorcycle rider myself, if they were a motorcycle rider that was wearing safety gear and that then had an accident and then it was a scar, scars don't need medical attention, but I would probably save them. you know why? I feel sorry for them. I don't feel sorry for any of these other people. I only feel sorry for this person. But most people picture like a gooey wound that needs medical attention. Scars don't need medical attention. If they were riding a motorcycle without any kind of safety gear, I would kill them. When I used to ride in groups, I would always do safety checks of all the other riders before I would ride in a cluster with them. Did not make a lot of friends, but I believe in safety first. So that's something to think about. Person disfigured by fire. They rescued a puppy from a burning home. Totally would save them. If a crack pipe exploded in their face, I would totally kill them. It's fascinating. Can you play this game and find the same very few words? What are the diabolical opposite reactions you would have to the same set of words? Can you just practice that kind of elasticity game? Because I think you'll become more responsible, or at least more conscious of the stereotypes that we are basing our judgments and assumptions on. And then we can decide to keep them, or we can decide to not keep them. We can decide to be flexible in the moment, but that's our work to do. That's not work for them to do for us. All right. Then we have, last but not least, the HIV positive person who continues to have sex. This is the only person that we know their HIV status. Nobody else evidently is responsible enough to tell the person giving this information what their HIV status is. I think it is also interesting to mention that it is not the late 1980s anymore, and yet the stereotypes still exist. When in a previous life, when I did sex education classes, primarily for queer women, I would always be told that they didn't have to do things with condoms because they didn't play with penises. Well, interestingly enough, it does not just take a penis to spread any kind of sexually transmitted infections or any of those kind of things. Like, safety precautions are still necessary. Now, fast forward, I do consulting work with a lot of dentist offices. I know that's kind of a leap, except it's really not. And so dental offices will tell me all the time that they don't need to ask about partners, the number of partners, sexual activity, etc., because they're dentists. So then I have to inform the dental staff, like, I don't want to get too much into your business at work, but what all have you ever done with your mouth? It's awkwardly quiet for a while, and then we're able to engage in a conversation about why these questions would be really important, of interest, especially if in a dental practice you're trying, the goal is to have a long-term relationship with a client. Then if that's the goal, then you need to know what's going on. The patient likely is not going to be 100% honest with you because they don't trust you and they don't know what your response is going to be. So then your job is to at least ask the questions to show them that it might be a safe place to tell the truth. That's how you actually kind of get a long-term relationship. But often our judgments and assumptions prevent us from even asking questions that we actually do need to know the answers to, that would also showcase that this is like a safe place. The HIV positive person who continues to have sex could be having safer sex, could be having consensual sex with a partner, could be masturbating. What means sex? 2024, that's a very big question of what means sex. But we still picture some kind of nymphomaniac, usually gay man. And then somebody often will be like, well, we can't have anybody poking people in the middle of a crisis. First off, sometimes crisis sex is kind of fun. Just saying. There's usually like a peak of births about 9 months after a crisis. Just saying, it's not just me. And it is also the case that women can be HIV positive. Not all gay men are nymphomaniacs, and even nymphomaniacs sometimes take a sandwich break. If we can begin to understand how we are making these choices, which are often incongruent and not in alignment with our beliefs and our values, and we can pay attention to the little stories. And by little, I often mean very complicated stories that we apply to almost no information, or sometimes that information is screened and pre-packaged and then we write a really challenging story or something about it. I believe that's called a job search committee hiring process. I don't know if any of you recruit anybody, but I did an experiment a couple of years ago. This was not 1,000 years ago. This was a couple of years ago. I live about 7 hours north of San Francisco, and the university here had frozen job hires. Can't do any job hires. This is pre-COVID, so I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago. And one search committee was approved because of something that happened in an apartment. They had to hire a new chair. And so the HR department at the university asked me to do a training with this particular search committee, because I guess one of the reasons there was a hiring freeze is that it turned out there was some bias happening in the hiring practices. You don't say. So this one approved search committee got to play with me for a couple of hours to fix, I'm using air quotes, any bias they might be bringing to the hiring process. If you think this is a problematic process, it sure is, but I do local work for food, so I at least got lunch. So because I have this personality, what I decided to do was I got a bunch of my friends to give me their CVs. And they gave me their CVs, and would obviously be able to be qualified as a chair for whatever this department was. They had the right education, they had the right titles, they had the right backgrounds. So I took 4 of my friends' resumes or CVs, and I took them and I just changed the names on top of the resume. Now, this is very stereotypical, and most of you know where I'm going, but it happened. That is the part that is still astonishing to me. So let's say, because Pat is my deputy. So Pat, Kendra, and Denise, you don't have to do anything, but you are lucky enough to have your videos on. So the 4 of us are the resumes. So what I did was I gave everyone in the room 8 resumes. So it was our 4 resumes and then our 4 resumes with a not white sounding name on it. I just made something up. Sometimes I actually just went on the keyboard and that was someone's last name. Did not change any of the content of the resume at all. They're physical copies. This is when we still played with each other in person. So they could see the physical copies and even see this is the same font, the same formatting. Like, it totally should not have worked. And yet it did. And they divided the search committee into small groups, and I asked them to pick their best candidate and their worst candidate. And all the groups picked the same best candidate. And it was a white sounding name from the Bay Area who they wrote a story about because it was a man's name. They wrote a story that that person, this guy, is going to love it up here because he's super outdoorsy. Now, the exact same resume was lost with the other name. And then the other 3 of us were actually debated as the worst candidate. And it was because we all had womanish names, they determined. That is not always true, but they had womanish names, and that womanish person was a city person and wouldn't be able to handle it up here. Now, personally, I agree, but that is not, I moved here because I got the feelings for someone. But it is important to know that even if they have the same physical sheets of paper in front of them multiple times in a small room, our bias will actually attach to the truth that we believe our story is doing. It's confirmation bias that we are responsible for. The reason why I wanted to do this activity as part of the series is that I think it's actually a really important skill to be able to stop, slow your roll enough to realize when you are working with facts and when you are convinced your story is a fact. And if you can notice that difference, you don't even necessarily have to edit your story, but can you notice that you are operating with what isn't a fact, it is a story? Now, I'm going to unfreeze you. Whoa. You are now unfrozen. So if you need to say anything out loud, process, happy to talk about that. If you want to share anything in the chat, I'm also happy to read anything that you can need to talk about or say. But what I'm curious about is the process of the outcome of this activity, not the process that you did with the boat. So what's interesting is that often when I open this part up for comments, people want to tell me their process of how they made decisions, or they want to tell me which 4 didn't get on the roof, or maybe the 3 and they were still floating and they didn't finish. No pun intended on the floating. I don't care. I made up the boat. I made up the 14 people, which frankly, I did not. I stole this activity from someone who made them up, which you are going to steal from me, which is why I'm giving you the facilitation guide. So I don't care about the boat. The boat was the metaphor to get us all centered in our head so that we could be able to catch ourselves in the process or the story writing that we do. So back to Amy's comment in the chat, these situations always stink. I would say they only stink when you know you're getting ready to get into one, but they always happen and you are able to navigate them all the time and you are generally convinced you're accurate and correct. So again, the texting number is 202-670-4262. Let me know what I can do to possibly help. The puddle is dried. Have at it. Good job. You are unfrozen. Thoughts, comments, questions about what happened up in here, not at the boat. I'll open it up. Bum, bum, bum. I did get a text message, but it was about something else. Bum, bum, bum. If it's helpful, because in case somebody else is doing this for the weekend, if you don't have access to the Zoom links, you can still register and subscribe with like in this case, it's a Gmail account. Feel free to go to the registration link and register with the email that you will have access to over the weekend. And also, high fives on having some boundaries and not access to work email on the weekend. That's amazing and not really plausible when you're self-employed. But you can go to betterdiversitytraining.com and just register with whatever email you'll have for the weekend. So I assumed that we were in a line and left the last 4. I really could not choose. Great. So notice, Kendra, that it's all about the boat, right? So sometimes it's safe place to talk about. That's great. That's the process that you chose. I want to use this time to talk about things that you noticed in your head that were maybe congruent with beliefs or values that you have, or possibly brave souls, things that you noticed in the process or the stories that you wrote about these 14 sets of 7 words or less that I typed, that you noticed that you thought. Maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't like it. What came up for you? But thanks for sharing, Kendra. Usually when people think that it's in a line, the boat can come back more than once as well. That's another creative outside of the box thinking. Ava, my values said no one would be left behind, so I created a solution that aligned with that. Ava, because I actually know you, that makes total sense, right? Is that you are a creative outside of the box thinker. And I bet in a lot of different situations, you are the voice that's like way over here. This is not a plug for my book, although while I'm here, good enough now. But you're way over here thinking of something, and those ideas are going to be able to solve problems in a bigger way than just the actual directions. I bet that's how you show up to a lot of group decisions. The boat needs to go twice. Great. Please notice we are still talking about the boat. Great. Other thoughts or comments about you that came up, your processes? When do you see these in real life? The hardest part of facilitating this when you steal this activity is I do an activity to catch people being themselves in their own brain, which seems like that would be easier to do, except it's not. So I catch everybody being themselves in their own brain, and then afterwards ask them to not do that anymore and now talk about their own brain behaviors. So you have to like go from here to here, but I'm the one that shoved you there in the first place. So welcome to facilitating this activity. Denise says, I figured out a way to win and my stories justified my confirmation bias. I was unaware of this and how it shows up. Sweet. And if it's helpful, Denise, you will forget all of this in a matter of minutes and go back to just being the regular old Denise. I was thinking of asking if anyone was willing to stay on the roof, asking for volunteers, right? Good job. You nailed my process on the head. Thanks, Holly. I think that basically means that you are a human. So we don't get that validated very often. But Holly, I would say that your response was pretty human. So high five to you. Congratulations. Or I guess I should do this. 5. High five. Great. Now I get a high five back. Perfect. Okay. So the texting number again, which is not visible on this slide because I didn't check it this morning, is 202-670-4262. Also, don't forget to do the Instagrammy thing. Yesterday, we talked about easy, hard, next, and promise. Because of this work, I want to give you a chance to just notice what was easy and hard about this activity. Did a next and a promise come up for you now that we are done with that activity? I think this is often frustrating to people because the directions are so nebulous, but this is a really great way to kind of like not close or tie a little bow. I don't really do bows, but where are we now that we have done that? So I just want to give you a second to kind of sit with yourself, take a breath. Those are free, evidently. Sit with yourself, and I want you to see if something came up for you that was easy or that was particularly hard about this. Did something come to you that you would want to do next? And is there a promise that you want to make? This is a really good process. I think anytime you're in a particularly challenging situation, you can steal this and be like, hold on, Kendra, what's going on up in here? I'm being you, Kendra, just so you know. What's going on up in here? Okay. Whew, that's over. What was easy about that? What was hard about that? Did it inspire something I need to do next? And do I need to make a promise to myself or someone else? All right, let's go to the grocery store, right? Like it's a really good way to kind of ground yourself in a given moment so that you can figure out kind of what you learned through a particular situation. I froze and thought, pile everyone on the boat. Great. I thought about how I immediately wanted to consider each person's worth and strengths. That's great. Takes forever. Hope your emergency's slow going. And the more information you know, the harder the choices are going to be. So questions to think, because this is thought-provoking, is what stories did you have that you didn't know you had? How can we become more conscious of our unconsciousness? How did positive bias show up in your world? Usually those people get saved instantaneously with no discussion. They just get saved. Why do we focus on negative bias in conversations about diversity and social justice? That's one of my personal favorites, because positive bias gets a pass, but it can be just as limiting as negative bias. Now, as I have done every day, if you want more of this, you can sign up for the book club before the end of the webinar series, which is 12 days after the 5th, which would be the 16th. And you're welcome to sign up. I do have some people who are already really interested, so that's kind of exciting. I will mail you a free book. Even if you do the small one inside your own organization, you get free books. But it's probably the last time I'm doing this because I made good progress on the new book yesterday. It's coming. It's coming. The whole point of this webinar series is also to support Crazy Horse Memorial. So use this QR code to make your own donation. If you are finding any of this of value, which based on your text messages you are, please make a donation to Crazy Horse. It would mean a lot to me. And if you have an employer match, please do that. I again tried to talk to my dogs about this employer match situation and they just said hard pass. They're not doing it. I can't help. So no employer match. And today's special announcement, kind of in line with my new book, is that I used to do these reading groups or like small discussion groups, and I'm going to launch another one. So it's going to be called Go There, and it's a 6-week long process, and we're actually going to go through the content and the processes that lead to cultural transformation within your organization and how to be prepared, how to recognize a problem that you likely don't face in your organization because you have so much power, privilege, or resources, but somebody else in your organization is telling you it exists. So how do you recognize what you don't even experience? And then the difference between a reaction and a response and how to make an informed response. We're going to go through all of that over 6 weeks. And if you send me an email, I'll tell you more information about it. I'm very excited, and I don't know all the details yet, so we might even crowdsource some of the details. But that's the Go There kind of mastermind group that I'm going to start. And if there's anything else I can do to help, please let me know. And I will see you this weekend. Very exciting. This weekend, we're going to do the process similar to yesterday, but specifically about ability and disability issues. And then Sunday, we are doing my second most popular stolen activity, which is called Sticks and Stones, and gets specifically to stereotypes within the LGBT community. But spoiler alert, I talk about how these stereotypes exist across all different identities, but don't tell anyone. Keep it rainbow friendly for now. So otherwise, I will see you on Saturday or Sunday, or some of you, I will see you on Monday because you'll watch the recordings and I'll still send the summary emails. But any other thoughts, comments, questions, anything I can help with? This is the slide for tomorrow. I jumped ahead. And this is the offer for the day. Thank you very much. Bum, 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 bum.